I am constantly amazed by the number of people that are confused about physiological insulin resistance versus pathological insulin resistance. Physiological insulin resistance is when the body becomes insulin resistant on purpose and it's serving a good purpose. Pathological insulin resistance, the one that I study more explicitly, is when the body's becoming insulin resistant and it's a disease state. So it was never supposed to be insulin resistant, and now that it is, it's actually causing other problems. But what they have in common, whether it's pathological insulin resistance or physiological insulin resistance, and this is where so many people get it wrong, in both instances, insulin is high. So anytime someone is invoking physiological insulin resistance, say in the context of a low carbohydrate diet, that's not right, because insulin goes down a lot. The insulin levels of the person are exquisitely low. This is not insulin resistance. That's something else, and we've talked about it in previous videos, but it is not insulin resistance. Physiological insulin resistance is just like pathological insulin resistance in that in both states, insulin levels are a lot higher. Now, right behind me is a slide of a lecture that I've been preparing. This is, the slide is actually highlighting the changes in insulin resistance and insulin over time in a woman who is pregnant. So you can see here I have insulin resistance, and that's this dark curve. And then on this axis I'm saying insulin, but kind of same directions here. And you'll see this is in the life of the woman pre-pregnancy, during pregnancy, and postpartum. In both instances, we have this dramatic increase in both insulin resistance and in the amount of insulin in her body. Now, further in this lecture, actually, I highlight some of the mechanism that explains it, but pregnancy is one of the two known periods of physiological insulin resistance in the life of a person. It's the two P's, puberty and pregnancy. Both of those instances, periods of explosive growth, tissue growth, are states of insulin resistance. And yes, in both of them, insulin is elevated during that period of insulin resistance. Now, just to really put a fine point on this, I wanted to show you the next slide. This is from a study that looked at the average amount of insulin needs, the insulin requirements of women who are type 1 diabetic, but also become pregnant. And you can see over the course of the pregnancy, look what happens to their insulin requirements. And that's because the insulin resistance during pregnancy is a state of high insulin. Her body needs more insulin. And so the insulin actually is almost doubled. The insulin needs have almost doubled at the peak of the pregnancy, right before birth. Anyway, so it's just some thoughts about physiological insulin resistance to wrap it all up. What pathological insulin resistance and physiological insulin resistance have in common is that insulin is elevated. If you ever hear somebody invoking physiological insulin resistance in the context of a low carb or ketogenic diet, laugh in their face. Make sure they know that they're wrong. That is not true. Those are not states of physiological insulin resistance. The two are puberty and pregnancy, and in both instances, insulin is elevated. If there's no elevation in insulin, then the body is not experiencing insulin resistance.